In the opulent yet rotting world of Fairmont Crest, a secret has just exploded like a spark tossed into a fuel depot. Tomas discovers that the child he cherished in his imagination carries Isaiah's blood. A steel-cold fury tightens every escape route, while Eva is trapped between the verdict of her conscience and the fear of losing the right to tell her own story. From this moment on, love is no longer a refuge but a battlefield of honor, money, and control of the narrative. Who takes the upper hand when rumors outrun the truth, when contracts, lawyers, and shadowy handshakes begin to redefine the fate of three people? Will Tomas choose forgiveness or punishment? Will Eva shoulder responsibility or keep her silence? Will Isaiah step back or turn the child into a shield of power? Step with me into the spiral of schemes and counterstrikes right now, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you won't miss what comes next. The blow crashed down on Tomas like a cold, merciless hammer when the truth rose out of the muck of lies. The child in Eva's womb was not his, but carried Isaiah's blood. Rage crawled up his spine, caustic and prideful, burning through every line of self-control he'd used to keep himself from collapse. He looked back at the almost perfect picture he'd tried to build for months, a carefully calculated wedding to mend old wounds, a clean future to wash away the stains of the past, an alliance strong enough to withstand the political and financial storm rolling toward Fairmont Crest. It all turned to rubble in an instant when the sealed test results were cracked open under the sterile white light, exposing a betrayal so raw it made every breath feel barbed, forcing Tomas to recognize that from the starting line he'd been sprinting full speed in a race whose finish would never belong to him. Truth, once imagined as a saving anchor, became a blade that severed the last threads of trust between him and Eva, and worse, it opened a new front where Isaiah wasn't merely the other man but the victor, holding the most powerful weapon in any game of power, bloodline. Tomas refused to give himself the luxury of falling apart, because collapse would mean conceding defeat before the battle even began. He chose anger as a discipline, refined it into fuel for cold calculation. He replayed every gesture, every silence, every strange disappearance of Eva in recent weeks, the deleted messages, the way she turned away from his eyes when his hand drifted, unthinking, over her stomach, trying to picture a future. Each scattered shard clicked into a cruel logic. Eva had tilted toward Isaiah before she ever chose loyalty to Tomas, and whatever hesitation she had, if any, was only a long enough pause for someone else to set a biological trap that couldn't be reversed. Once a child appears, alliances loosen, vows become mirages. Tomas understood this was no longer a matter of romance but a chessboard of legacy, assets, narrative control. The moment the story left the hands of the people involved and spun toward the public as a whirlwind of rumor. In the world Tomas knows, there is no space for permanent victims, there are only the quick and the devoured. He redrew the map in his head at once, preserve his public image so he wouldn't become a pitiable punchline, contain any leak about the test results so no one could turn it back on him, collect traces of who had manipulated the lab, maybe a technician leaned on by Isaiah's camp or some murky broker. The prenuptial drafts he prepared were now relics of naivete. He shredded them in memory and buried them under the ice of his anger, swapping in another toolkit entirely. Preserve capital, unwind risky positions, pull relational threads out of any commingled funds where Eva had been a signatory, plug the financial holes that might invite blackmail. He stopped asking why Eva had done it, since any answer would be a variation of weakness and calculation, and asked instead why he had failed to see, why he had allowed pity to slip in, why fear of loneliness had made him accept mismatched signs. The question made him angrier at himself than at anyone else, and that fury, paradoxically, helped him steady his footing. Eva sank into a whirlpool of conflicting feelings, where the life sprouting inside her became a shackle locking every exit. She felt trapped between protecting the baby and confessing the whole truth to Tomas, between a longing for shelter and the terror of being judged as a sellout. She recalled the moments Isaiah had lifted her when she crumpled under family warfare, the times he spoke of a safe future without power's knife edges. She was grateful for that, but even gratitude smelled of debt. She had tried to believe that silence would save everyone, that if Tomas never knew, she could build a counterfeit family and slowly fill it with decency later. But truth doesn't sit still, it slides through the smallest leak, demands legitimacy, and now, with everything broken open, Eva faced the harshest court of all, the court of her own conscience. Every decision she had deferred came back to collect, not only as tears but as the chill in Tomas's eyes no longer searching for an explanation, only recording a moral failure already complete. Isaiah stepped into the tragedy with the assuredness of someone who believes bloodline is strategy. He didn't need to say a word to fortify his position, he could wait while the DNA numbers reshaped the hierarchy. But that silence, to Tomas, was a triumphant smile, and triumph undisciplined missteps. Isaiah might have won a round with the arrival of the child, but he had also signed his name onto a new conflict map where every road leads into a trap. Tomas knew exactly what Isaiah wanted: a legitimized path, a sturdy financial pipeline from the family trust, a media umbrella to rinse away a complicated past. Tomas would not leave any door ajar. He would lock every handle with legal steel, shift the story from morality to procedure, and draw it out until the thing called love could only breathe through tubes handled by attorneys. Meanwhile, he would not ignore the shadows: a private team to track Isaiah's habits, locate fractures in his routines, follow murky payments, triangulate burner phones, reconstruct the panorama of who backed him and who stood ready to betray him once the scent of power blood filled the air. Tomas's rage sublimated into a cold mist, the kind that clarifies boundary lines that must be drawn immediately. He froze every joint account with Eva, he ordered legal to trigger asset protection clauses, he flashed a red light to calms to prepare layered narratives underscoring mental health, medical privacy, and the right to silence, dense enough to fog public perception until he finished positioning the board anew. He did not flinch at being labeled callous. Soft reputations never saved anyone in a town that feeds on gossip. What he needed was a hard silhouette to discourage those who would hurl stones into an open wound. At the same time, he refused to turn Eva into an open enemy, at least not yet, because a war in the daylight would hand Isaiah advantage. Better to push everything into closed rooms, where contracts and signatures choke the oxygen, where remorse, if it exists, must pay a filing fee. Eva clung to the scraps of her self-respect. She sketched a path to atonement, knowing it might be only a self-soothing mirage. She thought about voluntarily relinquishing benefits she once hoped to receive, about agreeing to any further tests, about a co-parenting plan with Isaiah that didn't touch Tomas's money, about crafting the least damaging conversation with the families so the child wouldn't become an emblem of conflict. But she knew no one would give her the quiet time to do any of that. By tomorrow, someone would willfully or accidentally spill the story over coffee, and eyes would turn to her as if she were a modern emblem of ancient betrayal. She understood that the worst part wouldn't be the accusations, but losing the right to narrate her own story. And when that right is stripped away, every explanation sounds like a late plea. Within the calculus Isaiah never voiced, he still had to face the mirror. He knew he wasn't innocent. He had chosen his timing because he understood how schedules run in a family splitting apart. He had chosen silence because sometimes silence compels others to say damaging things. But he also knew there are lines that, if crossed, would turn the baby into a hostage in a war of honor. He didn't want that, or at least he convinced himself he didn't. Good intentions, however, are ground into dust without disciplined restraint, and Isaiah, accustomed to quick wins, might make a fatal error in underestimating Tomas's endurance. He imagined Tomas would explode outward, but Tomas chose cold. He imagined Tomas would rush for sympathy, but Tomas retreated inward to build fortifications. With every misread, the battlefield thickened, and every backward step Isaiah took shifted more pressure onto Eva, who remained the only anchor between two cliffs. Fairmont Crest would not sit this out. Rumors would ripple along lavish verandas, cross ballroom thresholds into restaurant kitchens, slide into conference rooms paneled with expensive wood. The neutral would pick sides just because they smelled blood. Those who owed Tomas would convert favors into careful distance. Sleeping rivals would spring up to reorder their pieces. Anyone who understands the machinery of influence knows a personal humiliation quickly becomes a redistribution of power. Contracts awaiting signatures might stall under the sudden invocation of an ethics committee, sponsorship pipelines might pull their money in the name of caution, court calendars might be yanked forward as if clerks had abruptly found religion in efficiency. In this climate, the way Tomas, Eva, and Isaiah define themselves through endurance will determine the life cycle of the story. If Tomas lunges for revenge, he will cement himself as the antagonist. If Eva shrugs off responsibility, she will be remembered as the emblem of ingratitude. If Isaiah demands too much, he will be etched as a man who weaponized his child. In the end, the equation returns to its origin: personal motive. Can Tomas forgive to win the long game, or must he punish to preserve his dignity? Will Eva trade genuine contrition for a fragile patch of peace for the baby, or will she still opt for the cheap calm of rationalizations? Will Isaiah step back so he doesn't turn his child into a shield for power, or will he mistake the baby's existence for a permanent amulet? These questions lodge like darts in each heart, forcing decisions at a moment when every option carries a brutal price. Every path is carpeted with shards of broken trust, and any misstep will cut deeper than the initial betrayal. As night swallowed the glass facades of the estates, Tomas sat alone amid stacks of files, flipping through voided commitments and fresh investigative briefs, forcing himself to choose a way forward. He knew that at sunrise the world would still demand answers, and opportunists would come rattling his gates to test for cracks. He resolved to raise walls, tighten the perimeter, to redefine himself not by a love betrayed but by discipline and the capacity to hold the line. Elsewhere, Eva cradled her belly, listening to the baby's heartbeat, realizing that from this moment on, pleas for forgiveness meant nothing without an act of accountability commensurate with the harm she'd caused. Isaiah, brooding at a dark window, tried to picture a future where he wasn't jerked around by his own arrogance but could stand still when needed, stay silent at the right times, retreat one step so he wouldn't trade a temporary win for a permanent defeat. But can any of them do the right thing when pride, humiliation, and fury are tearing through every layer of reason? Does exposure truly liberate, or will it push all three into an endless cycle of reprisals? Will the child become a slim bridge between rash adults or the next spark for a war of honor? And when the rumor machines of Fairmont Crest roar to life, who will have the last word that defines this tale, the one with money, the one with law, or the one who dares to absorb the wound without drawing more blood? As the lights of Fairmont Crest dimmed and the glass panes reflected only sealed pockets of darkness, the story of three people did not end with a slammed door but with stifled breaths. Tomas sealed every leak like an architect of storms, turning anger into a cold steel barricade driven deep into the bedrock of power. He no longer needed soothing rhetoric, only order. Files were rearranged by a new priority, asset protection clauses were triggered, and exposed lines were pulled back from any gap that could be exploited. In the silence, he learned to endure pain as a reminder of discipline, because if emotion is a blade, then discipline is the sheath no one can pierce. He posed a question not meant to be answered immediately: is true victory reclaiming what was lost, or holding one's form intact against a cyclone determined to tear it apart? On the other side, Eva sat in the dark, counting a tiny heartbeat like a private ritual of atonement. She knew every justification was already late, that remorse would not erase signatures waiting to be laid down, would not soothe the eyes that would follow her as a fresh emblem of betrayal. Yet a stubborn thought stirred inside her: if truth once acted as a blade, perhaps truth, spoken at the right moment, could be the only bandage left. She sketched a narrow path, willing to trade, to lose, to be judged if it meant the child would not become a hostage. A question clung to her like a shadow: can a price paid high enough buy back the right to narrate one's own story, or had every door already shut the moment she chose silence? Isaiah stood at the window's edge, watching a city asleep where rumors never close their eyes. He understood that silence can win a round, but never the game. Bloodline gives a position, only discipline keeps it. He recalibrated his stride, cutting away impulses that could burn every way home, and etched into memory the fact that the man across from him was not as soft as gossip suggested. He asked himself where the line runs between fatherhood and ambition, between guarding a future and using that future as a shield, whether that line is a hair or a chain, and whether he had unknowingly cinched it around his own neck. The upper floors of this war are legal, media, and finance. The foundation is pride, humiliation, and fear. They fuse into a vortex that drags everything downward: sponsors wavering, ethics committees appearing on calendars out of nowhere, whispers hiding in the clink of glasses in ballroom corners. Each old friend of Tomas weighs a safe distance. Every relationship of Eva's becomes a test of patience. Each of Isaiah's partners listens for the wind's change. And within that spiral, only three constants remain: consequences always arrive on time, power always collects its tax, and weakness, if unacknowledged, turns into a blade that swings back. Night's ending is not a promise but a series of small, uncomfortable actions. An email that moves a meeting earlier than usual, a file envelope stamped urgent, a joint account frozen, a draft statement queued for release. Those small things are the real war drums. And to that steady beat, three people must choose a road. Tomas can turn pain into the rules of the game or let it turn him into an executioner. Eva can convert remorse into responsibility or let it curdle into self-pity theater. Isaiah can make fatherhood a shield for the child or a buckler for his ego. There is no path without blood, no choice without cost. Only one question is left hanging for tomorrow: who dares sign their name to a price they will pay to the end, and who will keep waiting for someone else to choose first so they can lay blame when the picture smears? When the first light touches the tiled roofs of Fairmont Crest, the war will only just be beginning. And whatever ending exists, if any, will belong to the one who knows how to stand still at the right moment, step back in the right place, and pay the right price before every doorway changes color into no way back.